Good afternoon, I'm TerryTopCat for clusterview.com for TerryTopCat Purrsents, and I'm with the bass extraordinaire Dale Davis. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good. You all right, Terry?
Very good. Nice to see you. First of all, thank you very much for your time.
No worries.
And I'm wearing my sunglasses. I've had an eye operation. I didn't want to scare everybody with the horror that's underneath. But so you've been a bass player for a long, long time.
Yep.
Just tell me how you got into music, because I read that you saw Jimi Hendrix and you started playing the guitar when you were younger, and then you changed instruments.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily that. I was always into music from the time I was a child. I remember listening to the Stones, the Who, the Small Faces.
Great band.
Massive Jimi Hendrix fan. I was born at that time in the mid-'60s, so you know. So I like a lot of 60s music. I did like a lot of loud music, you know. I was never into anything. Well, also my parents never had any Motown. They never had jazz.
Didn't? Okay.
No, they weren't into the Beatles. They were very blues based, and my mum liked a lot of the pop music that was going on around there at the time. So I was all, and then it progressed to listening to Radio 1, Radio Luxembourg.
Top of the Pops, early Top of the Pops.
Yeah, Top of the Pops. The old Grey Whistle Test was then. And then, so I was always influenced by music, but my dad was a big Jimi Hendrix fan at the time, you know, so, and I remember getting sacked from the choir when I was 7 and being a bit distraught. So, but then my dad had a guitar in the living room when I was 8 years old, and I went up to him and said, how do I play this? So, you know, he showed me a few chords. He'd only just started learning to play himself, you know, he'd only been playing for 5 years. And so it was a way of him getting part-time money as well as working during the day. So I started to play the guitar, went to school that summer, and my teacher at the time, my reception teacher, said, does anyone play the guitar? So I said yes. I just started playing, and then 2 months later, I did my first concert. Had to play a couple of songs, you know, Scarborough Fair and House of the Rising Sun, and I played them, and I felt great. And I said, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my life." So even though I had to go to school and everything was a bit higgledy-piggledy, you know, had to move from Reading and stuff like that. That was still my aim, to always be a musician.
Brilliant, so young to know, you know, that's your calling.
Yeah, and I was always mainly into the guitar then, you know, at the time. I was a massive Pete Townsend fan, and especially Jimi Hendrix and Brian Jones from the Stones. And then my mum was a Donovan fan, you know, Donovan the folk singer.
Sure. So
I went to see him when I was 12 years old at the Hexagon in Reading, and the one thing that I always remember was Danny Thompson, the double bass player. So at that point, he really turned me on to the sound of the bass. And at the same time, I had a couple of posters on my wall of Jimi Hendrix, and I thought, wow, okay, I'm not going to be as good as you. And I know it's quite naive, you know, because, you know, you can spend a whole lifetime and get nowhere near him. You know, you learn that as you get along. But so at that point, I stopped playing the guitar for a bit. I used to love football, I still do now, you know, so I used to play a lot of sport. Arsenal, but
yeah, doing well.
Yeah. So I used to play a lot of football, and then a school band. When I was 14, they said, "Dale, we know you've got a bass. Do you want to come and play bass for the school band?" And once I started playing the bass for the school band, then I started to play with lots of other bands. And literally, you know, by the time I got to college, I was playing in a band every night, you know, for 5 nights a week. And then
5 nights a week, wow.
Yeah, I could do rehearsing, you know. But then I started playing with my dad. I forgot to say that my dad's, he's a soca musician, calypso musician at the time. He's had to stop playing now. But I remember when I was 13, he used to get me to go on gigs. So that's where I got a lot of my stamina from.
Lovely.
So I used to play a lot of calypso then. And, you know, you'd play for hours. I remember the first time I played with him, it was like 13. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. He handed me the bass. And, you know, so you get into the whole lifestyle.
Sure.
And it was something that really appealed to me anyway. So I did that, and progressively just worked towards being a musician. I left Reading when I was 20, initially to study, to satisfy my mum and my dad that I was doing the right thing. But I went to the South Bank Poly, and within a term I'd spent more time in the studio with my friends, who was working at Christus Records at the time, than I did studying. So I just turned around to my parents and said, I'm going to stop, I'm just wasting everyone's time and money. Stayed in London doing temp work. And at that point, I started to get a bit more serious because I didn't really want to work, but I had to try and find a way of getting into the music scene. And, I used to go to a lot of jams and stuff, and there was a lot of jazz players.
In those days, there were loads of good musicians playing as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it was more, when I first came to London, there was the jazz thing, which I really, because I'm not a jazz, I don't really get to grips with it that easily. But then I started, when I moved to London, it was 86, but the following year, the whole rave scene started to take over. So by 1988, I decided to knuckle down, and instead of going out, having a couple of drinks every night with my mates, I said, right, I'm going to stop doing that. Because I'm not a big drinker here, but it's the whole social thing. So at the time, I decided to go to clubs and just study the music on my own. I just went, no social interaction really, just to soak up the music. So I did that for 2 or 3 years while I was doing a lot of wine bar gigs, and then suddenly I got a break with Norman through a guy called Shane Meehan, and also Steve Swindles. I don't know, do you know Steve Swindles?
Yeah, I know Steve Swindles, my gosh.
So he had a jam in Camden at WKD.
Yeah, it's great little venue.
Yeah, so fantastic venue.
Yeah.
So I went there once and went there another time, and then I did a few jam nights with Steve Swindles at Brown's, and then Shane Meehan, from the drummer who was a drummer in Beats International at the time, said that they were looking for a bass player because the bass player was going on holiday. Did I want to do it? And I said yes. So that was a two evening stint in Istanbul, and they asked me to stay on. So that was the way in through Norman.
Norman Cook is now Fatboy Slim,
Yeah,
and he was from the House Martins, if people didn't know.
Yes, that's right, yeah, and I was, a fan of the House Martins. But I was also, in that interim period, I remember going to a club that Norman was putting on at London University, and I thought, wow, that was a great night, he was playing some great music. And it changed my opinion about Norman as well, because, in the House Martins and stuff, it's quite different, quite indie, but then, he's obviously into the dance music. So when I met him and I started working with him, I felt that sort of like affinity, because I'd been researching all the stuff in the clubs.
And he's a bass player as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he
originally was a bass player.
Yeah, he's a multi-instrument. Yeah. And, he's got incredible knowledge. He's quite a character, Norman, as well. Very creative, always trying to create. So I started working with him, but because Ashley Slater, he was in a band called Microgroove, and they were Norman's backing band. So eventually Microgroove disbanded, and then that's how you came with Freak Power, because Norman and Ashley had joined forces together. So they asked me to work for them, and I did the first album, playing a bit bass and guitar and stuff like that, and did the touring.
What was touring like for you? So obviously you've been working with university friends and got in studios and stuff, but this was you're on albums that were getting released, and you're actually going on tours. So was that very different to what you were used to, or like you say, from 13 you had the glimpse of the lifestyle with your dad playing live? Yeah,
I had a glimpse of the lifestyle playing live, and also, even when I was younger, I used to do a lot of travelling playing football. So I got used to expanding my horizons. The Norman thing gave me my proper break, but the year beforehand I'd gone to do a 4-month tour in Italy, and it was quite an adventure, because the only thing that was correct was according to the contract, was the flight out on the first day. Everything was clear. And I saw everything that could go wrong in one tour, and at that point I thought to myself, well, nothing can be that bad again, so and also, so that and then you learn to live cheaply. So you cut back everything. Once I'd learned how to live on nothing, then everything was a bonus. So I did that. So it didn't discourage me. It just made me more determined to get on and do well in the industry. And then I went to the Jam and met Stephen. So within that year period, I'd gone from doing my first tour to actually going on the road. So when I actually got on the road with Norman and stuff like that, I was in a happy place then,
But you had a lot of success with those bands. So Beats International were you with them when
No, I wasn't there. And so I joined just before the transition from Beats International to
Freak Power.
Yeah, so there's a 6 month transition.
But with Freak Power, you guys they had a number one, didn't they? Or
Yeah,
that got re-released, didn't
yeah,
it?
it got re-released about 3 times, I think. So not when I was there. In fact, when I left Freak Power in '94, the last thing I said to them, I said, "Now I'm leaving. You're going to be famous." And they had the success with Turn On, Tune In, Cop Out.
But that was on a TV advert, which kind of helped it as well.
Yeah, and I think they were very close to getting dropped by all accounts, and then someone picked up on the advert, and that gave them a new lease of life. And
absolutely. So from Freak Power, you worked with various different artists. You met a gentleman called Ollie Marlin, didn't you? And he got you some gigs at the Night of the Proms.
Yes.
So explain what Night of the Proms is, because I've been there abroad, and it's different to the UK to the ones abroad in Holland, Belgium, Germany.
That's right.
As well.
Yeah. So I met Ollie while I was working with Freak Power, and I've forgotten the guy's name, but he was a guy from West London. So I was still living in West London at the time, in Shepherd's Bush, and just up on Harrow Road there on Maida Hill, but then Ollie just started doing this thing called Night of the Proms, and at the time he was a successful, he still is now, a successful musician, and
was it very multicultural? As in, like, was there many? He's obviously from the UK.
Yeah.
So was there many English musicians, or they got musicians from all over the world?
The first ever proms they did, they were the 2 guys who organised it was they were students at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they were a big fan of the song Music by John Miles, so they pulled him out, they got him out, but John...
From retirement, or what was he...
No, John was still doing stuff, but I think during that time, he started working with Tina, or the other way around, so...
That's right, yeah, with Tina Turner.
Yes, so it was effectively Tina's band that used to go out and do... They were like the house band, so...
but with an orchestra. Obviously.
Yeah, so when I first did it in '94, it'd been going about 4 or 5 years then, and there was 100 choir and 100-piece.
Wow, amazing.
Orchestra. So there was 200 of us on stage when we first did it. Toto, they were the headline act.
Toto, Africa.
Yeah, Rosanna, and then I met Paul Young there. So
that's how you met Paul Young.
Yeah, so and then I did that the first year I did it. So we played to massive arenas, indoor arenas like the Sports Palace, which I think was the biggest indoor arena at the time. We used to do the West Van Halle, the Munich Stadium in Germany. So and the Ahoy in Rotterdam, and we'd play for many nights. I did 17 nights on the trot at the Ahoy.
With which artists? With Toto or various ones?
Depending on who it was for that year.
I see. So, okay.
In the time I was there, I worked with Simple Minds. Well, you're part of the band, but the sort of artists you've got Simple Minds. When I did it, there was Randy Crawford, Blondie.
Randy Crawford, wow.
Mark King from Level 42. So that's only part of them, but they're fantastic artists.
And they would sing 3 or 4 of their big hits, maybe the headliner with 5 or 6.
Yeah, with the orchestra.
With the orchestra and the house band.
Yes, yeah.
And when I went and saw Grace, I think in 2009 or 10, she had all the I don't know if they had visuals as well, the big screens as well.
So
maybe not then, or...
Yeah, no, they would have done.
Okay.
When I stopped doing it in 1999, they started to bring out the big screens, the big LEDs were starting to come into fashion then. And they were very... it was very cutting edge, because we were the first people to use in-ears and stuff like that.
Okay.
And the first time I'd seen perspex screens and floor, vibrating monitors as opposed to speakers and stuff. Because there was always so much noise coming off the electric band that it disturbed the classical musicians. So, so there was a lot of that going on. It was very good. It was a big organisation. Yeah, definitely. We caught a plane once, and there was 270 of us had to charter a plane. Everyone on the plane. They were great times. It's not something that I could do all the time. So after 4 years of doing it and being 4 or 5 year period, and I worked with other people in between that, but it's always out of the country. I felt that it was time to come back to England, and try and work with newer artists, because although it's great working with established artists, I just felt I needed something new and fresh. So when I came back to England, I started, I had a year sort of like of making that transition again. And I started to work with a girl called Shay Seeger. I don't know.
My brother worked on her album.
There you go. So
that's another connection. Yeah, she was brilliant.
Yeah.
She was on RCA, and The Last Time was a great single of hers. The album was personally, I heard her demos. I thought the demos were better than the recorded version, the album. But it was brilliant. She's a great artist. I don't know if she's still doing music. I think she moved back to the States.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I did that, and at the time I worked with a girl called Amy Stutt, who was on 19.
Yes, I remember
and then
her
another
as well.
girl called Lucy Silvas,
who's a brilliant songwriter actually.
So and then at that time, so I worked with those three girls over a year period, and then work went quiet. I moved and I got married, and then I started working with Amy. So it was like a run of 4.
So after those 3 artists, so tell me how did you get introduced to Amy? Was it through an A&R guy or a musical director of a musician that you knew?
Yeah, so I did a function gig over in Essex, and the guitarist, he remembered me from that day because they were looking. He was the MD for Amy at the time. A guy
so
called
please
Ian,
explain what MD is. Musical director.
Yeah, so they're the people who come up with arrangements on stage. They can sometimes choose a band, be the link between the musician, the artist, and the management and the record company. So it's quite a big responsibility. I mean, in years after that, I felt that I used to get paid to get shouted at. So but
you always, from what I saw you when you play with Amy, and what I've seen on visuals as well, I've always seen that you had a great relationship with Amy.
Yeah, I think, but that's down to the fact that Amy was so great as an artist, and she was so comfortable. She had such musical ability that she could really lead you. All you have to do is follow her.
And a joy as a musician to have an artist to work with like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so you met this at the function band. So
and then he
had she recorded her first album by then?
No. So
okay.
And then it was a bit of a funny story, and it's funny how fate works. But then I moved to I bought a place in Hampton, and I had a couple of friends. One called Stuart Anning, who was her original drummer, and another guy called Paul Davis. And what we used to, they used to have a studio in Epsom, and used to go down there a lot because it was only 20 minutes away, and we're great mates and stuff. Used to hang out. But then Stuart came up to me one afternoon, and he said, "Would you be interested in working with a girl called Amy Winehouse? She's about to go on tour with Annie Lennox." And I said,
Annie Lennox?
"No." So I said, "Yes, I'd be interested in doing it." But then the tour never happened. But then I got the phone call to go and audition. So I went down to Survival Studios in Acton.
I know Survival.
Well, yeah, it literally is Survival, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's gone now. I went down there. It's a real shame. But so I went down for the audition, and Amy had already. The guy beforehand was a guy called Steve Waters, and she wanted him to do it. He was a tall, attractive guy, but then he was working with George Michael at the time, and so he needed to do that. I think he wanted more than what he was, because she was a new artist. Obviously, they weren't going to be able to pay that sort of wage. So he did one gig, and then they called me in, and I dubbed myself the uglier, cheaper version. So I did that, and then I played bass.
Instant rapport with her and with the other musicians.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, great.
Because I know Howie from Roachford. Was Howie in the band?
No, he wasn't in the band then, because Ian was the
guitarist.
Yeah, the guitarist, and then there was 3 horn players at the time, and then a drummer, and Amy used to play guitar at that time, and within 2 weeks of me joining the band, we did the carnival round at Palace Square here. So
that must have been great.
Yeah, and carnival's a hard crowd,
Very hard crowd.
But we were doing this gig, and then halfway through the gig, you just saw people turn up, and then Amy just, like, her performance just got more and more powerful. By the end of it, I thought to myself, you really don't need a band here because you're that good on your own. And it really just came out of the blue, and it really struck me. I mean, I was well impressed when I first heard Stronger Than Me demos and the stuff I had to learn for the audition. But to actually see her on stage and deliver, I thought, wow, this is a genuinely special talent. And at that point I thought, oh, I'm going to start making sure you're right, because I was like the elder statesman in the band. So I'd always look out for her. But we always got on well, even right from the off, you know. So the whole band, it was a very good-natured band, and we had a lot of fun. And she was a wonderful person and a great singer and a great human being, you know. So,
did you get any chance to write with her at all?
No, because you know I think once she works out what she wants to do in her head, then she can go off and do it on her own.
Sure.
And she was working with Salam Remy at the time when
That's
we
right.
first joined her, and Frank hadn't been finished. And Salam's an incredible producer, you know, very prolific, capable of doing everything himself. The majority of it, and if he doesn't, then he just gets it sent off to people and they just deliver, you know. So, and when I first heard Frank, I thought it was a very new take on jazz, very interesting, you know.
I heard it, so I haven't seen him in years. So Felix Howard, I was friends with Felix, and he co-wrote some of the songs on Frank. So I went to his little studio, I think off Old Compton Street. So he went up this little studio up the stairs, and he said, "Oh, what with this new singer called Amy." As soon as I heard some of the songs. Well, he played most of the album, but my hairs were on the back. And then I went and saw her with Darkest Was Beads, who signed and was there at the Bush Hall, and I just knew what an extraordinary talent she is. Different to, can't explain, she's just different to a lot of the female artists at that time, and timeless.
Yeah, and I always felt with Amy, while she was the same age as a lot of the girls I was working with, Shay and Lucy, she just seemed to have that edge where she knew she was a woman. You know, you could feel that she understood herself, and while she might not have appeared to be confident, she just had that ability to turn things around. You know, such immense power with her voice and lyrically as well. You know, so that was incredible. And there's also, you know, there was a link between Darkest. So I knew Darkest when he first started working at Island.
Oh, did you?
When
okay.
he started working with Freak Powers. So,
of course.
So they were all on the same label.
And he signed Lewis Taylor, who I absolutely love.
So, yeah, he's very influential, Darkest.
Yes.
And, you know, a great person, obviously. So, so there was always a link there, you know. At the time, I used to do a lot of work for Island and EMI, and not so much for things, people like Sony or Warner's. It was just funny how I ended up in that sort of like loop. But so I worked with Amy for 8 years and did a lot of things aside of that as well, you know. She really was as good as it gets, in my opinion.
No, I agree, as a music fan. And
yeah.
So let's come to like now, and with COVID, as a touring musician, that must have hit you really hard, as well as all the crews, as well as musicians.
Yeah. So just to go back to that, I mean, you know, working with Amy, I've worked with a lot of great artists, but, you know, it's a fact that I think because she was just coming from the start, you know, watching the progression and watching the ending. A lot of the established artists, they're fantastic, but, you know, watching the transition.
Absolutely.
And also having the bond with her, as, you know, we became good friends.
You became a musical director as well.
Became good friends and stuff like that. So
and she had an amazing personality as well.
Definitely.
I mean, she was definitely one-off.
Yeah, generous to a fault, if anything. You know, I thought she gave so much that she just left herself short. So anyway, going back to COVID, that's a very interesting conversation. I mean, at the moment, I've been busy coming out of COVID. I was busy actually during COVID as well.
So you write your own material and produce as well?
I do a bit of production and, you know, and I have done a little bit of library music as well. But during COVID, I decided to get more into trying to do stuff myself, so I became more self-sufficient. And I managed to survive through those, definitely the first year and a half. And even when they lifted the restrictions in August 2020, I still managed to get to do gigs, you know. So I was busy during that 4-month period between August and November. I'd do 2 nights a week, and then in the end I did a residency for 5 nights on the Spin, you know, and that was quite difficult. But I was grateful at the time that I was still managing to work, and then we had another lockdown for 4 or 5 months, didn't we? So I spent most of the time in the studio, and, you know, you do online stuff might do songs for other people, you might do bass for other people.
How was that different online? Were you
Well,
used to that before? Or?
Yeah, I was, yeah. I'd been working my way towards a whole online thing from the mid-noughties.
Okay.
You know, so, and then the technology's obviously improved, so it's easier, and the quality's improved as well. So I did a lot of that. So that kept me going. It wasn't a big adjustment for me. And during lockdown, I did spend a lot of time with a piece of software which allows you to play live with different musicians all over the world. So
I've seen some of the videos from that where other
oh,
people
okay,
all
yeah,
collaborate.
Yeah,
I think Brian May did one with this one and that one.
Oh no,
yeah.
but these a lot of the time I think they're just videos that people
collated together.
Collated together.
But
I did this thing where you play live.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
you obviously got latency issues, and once I think with the technology, once you get the latency sorted out, so it's down to instant, then you'll be able to do stuff online all day long. I think sometimes a breaking in communication with the latency can cause conversations going in a different direction. So I think once I get that sorted out, but then last August I just worked. So for the first 2 or 3 months, I just work at the weekends, and then the weekday work started to come back, and then so things got busy right till Christmas, and then there was a quiet period for everyone. I think for January and February, with people getting used to the year, and then I've been busy since then.
And how did Brexit affect you guys with touring? Did it really affect you much?
It hasn't
more
affected,
difficult for maybe artists in the industry if
definitely.
they want to go abroad, and then that affects you because maybe you can't go on the European tour with them.
Well, you got the Schengen issue at the moment with the 90 days working in 180. So I know people have started to lose work there where they've been in Europe and then they've been asked to do more dates, but they can't because they're overstaying their time. I don't know how they're going to sort it out. I mean, Brexit and COVID. In my opinion, COVID, I just looked at it as another obstacle in the life of a freelance musician.
Yeah.
So just a case of hanging in there and seeing how long, it took before it came out. And the thing is, there's always going to be music. It's just how the industry was going to be once you come out of it. It's really funny because I mean, life has been chaotic since we've come out of COVID because you need twice as much time to do, twice as many things, so that there's a lot of you need a lot of effort to keep going. But and I've done so many things I can't really keep on top of it. But you're just constantly going and going. But I'm glad that the industry's picked up, and I appreciate it more for that. As a result, I'm not getting any younger, so if the fact that I'm still working is
You're right.
I'm content with it.
Benefit.
Yeah, and especially as a lot of people can fall by the wayside or have done as a result.
Yes, that's right. Well, the government telling you, well, if you're a musician, well, maybe you should learn another.
Yeah. And that could have potentially been on the cards, but I just you have to have a lot of patience.
And do you listen to a lot of music when when you're not playing, or are you one of these musicians like, when I'm always working with music and touring, you like listening to music yourself, or depends on your mood?
Yeah, it depends on my mood. But I mean, now I spend so much time doing stuff, whether it be playing or having to do all bits that I do switch off. I do love football still, so and there's more football on, and and it's still the same two passions that I've had as a child, as a 8-year-old. So
Me too. I'm passionate about football.
Well, I was born the day England won the World Cup final.
Were you?
I think that's where.
And we got the World Cup coming up next month as well.
So that's So I think that's where I was born in the evening, in the height of the celebration. So, and then I popped out. So that's always, no one else in my family likes it. I think that's just as a byproduct of me being born that day.
So we've got to wrap this up. But I just want to ask you a couple of other things. So you're involved in the Amy Winehouse band, so tell everyone what that's about. And it's all the last touring musicians that played with various ones you've done over the time.
I mean, when Amy passed, I was a bit reluctant to do anything for a while. I had a friend one night and he said to me, look, Dale, if anyone's going to do it, you should do it. And I went, oh yeah. So, and then I got approached by a couple of guys who do other things as well, and they decided to get the band back together. So when I first started doing it, I was a bit reluctant to do it, but once you see the crowd's reaction and how much Amy meant to people,
sure,
that's why, you know.
So what's the singer's name?
There's a girl called Bronte Shande, and she's excellent, you know. So, and it's good fun doing it. I mean, you know, it's definitely taken on its own entity because we've been doing it on and off for the last 6 years now. But you know, we've got a few shows coming up towards the end of the year. And
in the UK or Germany?
Yeah, they're in the UK.
Okay, I'd love to come. I have to come see it.
Yeah, they're none local though, unfortunately. The nearest one's Milton Keynes, I think, for the time being. And then we've got a trip in Paris at the end of November. So yeah.
Did you let the family know?
Well,
they don't have any much input with that, or do you tell Mitch or the mum?
No, I haven't spoken to anyone about that at all, and they probably know now.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
No, there's enough online to see what. You know. But I think
it's your own tribute to her, and and then like you say,
and there's so many tributes that.
Oh, are there?
Amy, absolutely stacks of Amy tributes all around the world. You know.
Right. But this is with the original members who knew her well and played with her. So
you do get that feeling as well, especially with Bronte as well. There's times where she's on stage where it's like being in the early days of Frank with Amy, and she studied Amy from the age of 8, so she's really got her down, you know, the way she sings.
Meet you downstairs in the bar and her, your rolled up sleeves and your Scotty shirt. You said, try to make me go to rehab, but I said no, no, no. Why don't you come on with Valerie? Valerie, 'cause it's me and Mr. Jones. Oh, we only said goodbye with words. I died 100 times. You go back to her and I go back to her. We only said goodbye with words. I died 100 times.
Is it all just Amy's music, or do you do some other?
No, we just do, yeah. And we try and keep it, you know, fairly much to the sort of the original show, because especially a lot of the girls now that are going to the shows, they're in their early 20s, and they would have been 8 or 9 when they first saw Amy. And, you know, that's the closest they're going to get to see Amy. And you realise that, you know, you see couples in the audience, they dance to certain songs and the emotion. You think, okay, they got together over this.
Yeah. Which songs did you like most of hers?
Well, for me, when on Frank, Moody's Mood is always, it's just the fact that, you know, it's such a difficult song. And then Me and Mr. Jones, when I first heard Rehab, Me and Mr. Jones was the one, you know, 'cause it's just got that rock and roll swing on it, isn't it, you know, quite bawdy. But then there's so many great songs. Love Is the Losing Game is fantastic.
I like Stronger Than Me. I mean,
of course, yeah.
I mean, like you said, there's so many great songs.
They're all great, you know. It's just, and even some of the stuff that hasn't been released is.
But there's quite a few gems there.
Well, I don't know now, to be honest.
Okay.
Because it's such a short career, you know. Unfortunately, it's only 2 albums long.
But they did the Lioness, so that was all, wasn't that?
Posthumous stuff, yeah. So, and that was some of it was original, some of it had been reworked as well.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think there's much.
One last question: what was it like working in the studio with her?
I never did much studio work, but when we did.
Well, you did a lot of TV work as well.
But and then of course. But Amy in the studio was quite the last
specific what she wanted, or
not really. She was just capable of delivering so much, and she was the person whose theory was that you don't go in a studio to sit there and do loads and loads of takes. So I remember the last time I worked with her in the studio when we did a version of Cupid. She came in, she'd gone 15 minutes later, and to take you is just the one take.
Wow.
You know, so she had that ability to deliver. And I mean, some of the stories that I've heard about her as well, Wake Up Alone, you know, by all accounts, she'd written out a piece of paper with all the lyrics, went in there and sang nothing like the paper. You know, people like John Martin, they used to improvise a lot of their lyrics and stuff like that. So she had that ability, and also there could be a lot of chaos going on musically, but as soon as she sang, everything would just settle down, you know. So she just had that ability to glue everything together.
What's future projects for you coming up?
Well, still doing the gigs. As I say, I'm only...
Which artists are you working with now? Are you
still doing the Forever Amy stuff. I'm working with a young girl at the moment, country singer called Savannah Gardner.
Country? Okay, that's interesting.
And then I've been working with one of the keyboard players from Freak Power, Carly Bryant. So her stuff's her stuff's very alternative. Looking forward to hopefully that coming out. And I do odd bits and bobs, you know. So, but life's so chaotic. You just do whatever gets thrown at you. And then we've got a few more Forever Amy gigs next year potentially, and then if the phone goes, then you know that. So
well, thank you so much for your time, Dale. That was a really lovely chat. And Dale Davis, bass player extraordinaire, with all the wonderful artists he's mentioned, and World Cup coming up soon. Look forward to that. Thank you. TerryTopCat Presents for ColossalView.com.